Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am excited to take you to Bluffton, Georgia, today to introduce you to Will Harris, who is with White Oak Pastures, a fourth-generation farmer who is going to share with us what regenerative agriculture is and how we can incorporate that into our daily lives as well as into our meetings and events. So welcome to the show, Will.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate you having me on. Delighted to be here. I'm
excited to have you here. And just to let everybody know, I've been to the farm. It's about 7 years, I guess. I've been to the farm and gotten a tour, and it's great, fantastic. And I've known about you for much longer than that, having lived in Atlanta for such a long time. So I'm very honored to have you here with us today. So tell everybody who you are, who Will Harris is, and what is White Oak Pastures.
I am Will Harris. I am the fourth generation of my family to own and operate the farm, which is called White Oak Pastures. I'm currently aided by two daughters and two in-laws, and between the two of them, they have 5 children. So they are the sixth generation of my family on the farm. My great-grandfather started the farm in 1866, and he operated the farm all his life, as did his son, who was my grandfather, as did his son, who was my father. Great change occurred on my dad's watch. My dad was born in 1920. He took over the farm in post-World War II, 1945, and that was when the great industrialization of agriculture occurred. And my dad very successfully industrialized, commoditized, centralized the farm. On his watch, it left being a historical family farm that was in a lot of different businesses. They raised cows, hogs, sheep, goats, poultry, vegetables, grain, whatever. They raised whatever the land would provide. Mm-hmm. But my dad, under the post-World War II agricultural revolution, turned this farm into a pure cultural cattle farm. There was a monocultural, only raised cattle. And he was always very proud of that. He, understandably, it allowed him to be a real expert cattleman. And he was. He didn't have to be a jack of all trades. And he ran the farm very successfully. We weren't rich people, but the farm was paid for, and we lived well. I never wanted to do anything except run the farm industrially as a cattle operation, as my dad had. That was when I was a little boy, and all the other little boys wanted to be astronauts and firemen and policemen, I just wanted to run the farm. So when I graduated high school, I went to the University of Georgia. I graduated from the University of Georgia with my degree in animal science in 1976. Kind of interesting to me that my degree, animal science, had previously been animal husbandry, but it changed as as farming evolved.
Okay.
It left being a culture and became a science. That's very telling of a lot of things we've done. Then I came home and I did some other things, but I helped run the farm until I took over and ran the farm, starting in the mid 1990s. I'm not quite that old. I'm pretty old. But in the mid 1990s, I started changing the model. I started moving it from the very industrial monocultural cattle operation that my dad had operated to more what we do now. And
What instigated you doing that?
the excesses of that monocultural cattle operation that I had found so titillating in my youth. Boy, I've been about 40 or so years old. I was starting to look at it more critically, and really just the things I didn't like about it as well. So I started transitioning the farm in the mid-90s. And today, and again, there's a monocultural cattle operation, industrial cattle operation. Today we pasture raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, and pasture poultry and an organic vegetable garden, vegetable farm, and honey and eggs and a number of other things. We take advantage of the bounty that the land offers when it's managed holistically, as opposed to industrial.
And what has that, and is that what we would term regenerative agriculture, and how long did it take you to switch the land? Because the land is much healthier now, right?
The land is much healthier now, and it's still transitioning. I don't know that we, like other industrial farmers, had done incredible damage to our land. The indicator that I rely on most heavily is the organic matter. That's not all that's important, but it's a very useful indicator. And the organic matter in our soil on our farm had gotten down to 0.5%. And that's really low. That's pretty much a dead mineral medium.
Okay.
So it's a little bit better than the beach.
Okay.
Today it's 5% organic matter, which is 10 times more. And then it's quite a lot. Generally, 1% organic matter in the soil will hold an inch rain event.
Okay.
If you've got, that's 27,000 gallons of water per acre on an inch rain event. Wow. So if you get more than a half an inch of rain on land that's 0.5% organic matter, it just runs off. If my land at 5% organic matter will absorb a 5-inch rain event. And we've got some really telling videos of it doing that, of it, the land, water washing off a neighboring farm and being, for the most part, soaking in, being absorbed on our side. So it's very important. It's to have your land a thriving organic medium versus a dead mineral medium. It's very visual. You can get handfuls of it and see it, even if you don't know anything about farming. It's just very obvious what's better. Right.
Now, and so define, because this is about regenerative agriculture. So is that what that is in an essence, basically? Or can you just tell people what it really means, or what we're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of definitions for regenerative agriculture, and some of them are very confusing. Some of them I don't understand. But for me, it's very simple. And I think it's easy for people to understand that even aren't part of it. But in nature, there are cycles, many cycles of nature. Some we can see and recognize, and some of them we can't. Some of them are beyond our perception. But the ones that we can easily see would be the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the energy cycle, the microbial cycle, many others, many cycles. And we can see them. Those cycles, when they are operating optimally, generate an abundance.
Okay.
And that abundance is what we live on. That's the only real wealth there, is that abundance that maintains life. I would love to just witness the prehistoric days when all those oil reserves, oil and gas and coal, were captured and held in the earth. I mean, nature must have really been rocking and rolling. I can only imagine how that could have looked. But that's how we got all that energy trapped in the soil down there.
Right.
Then for the last 80 or so years, we've been releasing it, both that down there, but that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this energy in the soil that we live on. We've degraded the organic matter in the soil and put it up in the form of greenhouse gases at just an alarming rate. And we've done it to produce this super cheap, super abundant food that's really not cheap. It's just we move the costs. And now I fear we're at a point where we're going to have to start paying those costs. And I think it's going to be very expensive.
So it costs a lot of money to make this super cheap food that we get at the grocery store, at a fast food restaurant, but we don't see it. It's being hidden somewhere. Yeah.
The costs are being externalized. Mm-hmm. If you look at, I'm on the Gulf Coast, not too far from the Gulf of Mexico, Apalachicola. I was raised eating cheap Apalachicola oysters. The people I'm close enough to the coast that those people could harvest those oysters and bring them in and ice them down and peddle them. And they'd make it this far north. We do oysters cheaply all the time. And that was an abundance of nature. Those oysters were in abundance. And now they don't oyster in Apalachicola Bay anymore. There's a moratorium on it because we polluted the bay, and the cheap industrial food that we have enjoyed for the last 80 years have had incredible costs that we didn't pay at the time, but the costs were.
So when the cost of what we've done, we can see it in farms, right? In looking at the farms that are next to you or near you, and I've seen pictures of farms in California, like one farmer who raises chickens, his field is green, doing the same practices you have, and the one next to him is just like completely brown, like my shirt. And how do we do that next to each other and not realize the benefit of the other?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is that A, people are so isolated from that sort of thing. And B, the story is dominated by big food companies. They tell the story, and they tell the story the way they want to. They're tremendous amounts of money hiring brilliant people to create the messaging. And the messaging is, boy, this food we produce is really good and it's really cheap. And nobody realizes, or few consumers realize they're complicit in ecological damage when they buy that food. My mother's generation and my wife's generation and many in my daughter's generation believe that if the food at the grocery store was not fine, they wouldn't have it in there. I mean, the fact that they sell it at Walmart, it must be fine. They wouldn't have it in there if it wasn't fine. The fact that big food companies that you hear the name of all the time on the radio or TV, they wouldn't sell that product if it weren't fine. But it's not fine. It's fine probably in terms of the food safety, that if you eat it, you won't fall over with an acute illness. It's probably fine from that perspective. It may not be fine from a health perspective, although I don't talk about that. I'm not a health professional. There are plenty of really sharp people, the Paul Saladinos of the world. The list goes on and on about really sharp people who could talk to you about the health of industrially produced food. Listen to them, don't listen to me. I don't know that. What I know about is the impact on the land and the animals in the rural community. I know a lot about that, and it's devastating.
So in changing the farm, what have you seen the impact on your community and on your employees in their health and the surrounding farmland?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I made up my mind to cease being an uber industrial cattleman, which I was, I did it because of the impact on the land and the animals. I'd gone from being pretty oblivious to the devastating things I was doing to my land and my animals to really focused on that. So I started implementing changes, and all for the land and the animals. And I was aware that my rural community, Bluffton, Georgia, had become impoverished. And I knew that. It had been increasingly impoverished all my life. That, in retrospect, that started post-World War II. I was born in 1954, but it was gradual, and it was just, we residents of these rural communities, agrarian communities, were just conditioned to the fact that, yep, my community is wasting away. It's bad, I can't help it, but that's what's happening, that's what's going to happen. And I was of that mindset, but I did change my focus in terms of land and animals. And I really changed a lot about how I did that. And I kind of looked up and noticed after several years that, wow, this town is becoming a nice place again. When I was farming industrially, I had probably three or four minimum wage employees. And they, nor me, did much to boost this economy. We went to a trade center like Albany, Georgia, Dothan, Alabama to make that's where we spent our money. But when I started changing the way I farm, I started hiring people. And I started hiring good people. And I started paying them more money. And today we've got 180 or so employees that make well above the county average. I'm not proud of what our people make. I wish they made more, but it's significantly above the county average. So we're the largest private employer in the county, and the town has become a really nice little place again. I'm very proud of Bluffton, Georgia. You know, it had reached the point that the only thing you could buy in Bluffton was a stamp, U.S. postage stamp, and that was about it. Post office was open 2 or 3 hours a day. I don't know what it was. I never could catch them there. But today we've got a store and a restaurant and lodging and an RV park, and we bought a bunch of houses and fixed them up for employees. And it's not Beverly Hills, but it is a nice little place, and I'm proud of it.
That's awesome. All right, we have a question from a listener here. Falabi wants to know how you are able to manage thousands of acres full of cows, hogs, sheep, and the rest. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and I don't do all that. I do some of it, and it's a good question too. So when I had 3 or 4 minimum wage employees, I was the only decision maker on the farm, and I ran it very autonomously, and I told everybody what to do every day. And it worked fine. We made money. Today, with 180 employees, it is not that way anymore. We have structure. There are 7 of us that run the farm, 7 directors. Me, 2 children, 2 in-laws, 2 non-family members. That's 7. I think it's what we did.
Yeah.
Those 7 people all have different parts of the farm that they're in charge of. The livestock, the administration stuff, the customer-facing things like restaurant and RV park and those kind of things. Everybody's got a job and duties. Those 7 people manage 25 managers. 25,
oh, wow. Okay.
25 people I'm very proud of, very good people that run parts of the business. And then those 25 managers supervise the 100 people that are left over. So we have structure. I'm very proud. I'm 68, I think. And there was a time that if I worried about what if something happens to me, it will fall apart. And now it won't. Now we have a management structure here that will survive any of us departing. So that's very encouraging for me.
Agreed. And especially in this day and age where I think there's a lot of young people who want to get back into farming, but there are also family farms that don't have anybody to give them back down to. So I think that's very encouraging and inspiring. Now, when I lived in Atlanta, and it's been 7 years, I guess, I don't know 2017, I know you had testified on Capitol Hill for the work that you're doing and pushing that forward. Do you see that work, and I've heard you speak at Georgia Organics conferences as well, but have you seen that work transform other farmers around the country in Georgia, and do you see the practices that you follow being adopted, especially with what we see going on with climate change?
I'm kind of sorry you asked that question.
Sorry.
No, I mean, it's fine. But because the answer is no, sadly, there's not been nearly the progress made that I had hoped. I've been to Capitol Hill several times. I hope I never go back. I believe that our politicians are controlled by the big companies, the big food, big ag, and I just don't see much relief in terms of government regulation for people who want to farm this way. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying that I don't think that we need to be looking to the government to do it. And I'm disappointed that this farming philosophy that I've embraced has not caught traction more than it has. I understand why it's economically, it's not a good investment. I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I got it. I'm fine with it. But our return on investment is terrible.
Wow.
We're very fortunate that we've got equity in the land and we're devoted to it and we're making a living and I'm not hungry. We're fine. But the return on investment is not good. So it's hard for other people to get into it, especially people who weren't fortunate enough to inherit a farm the way I did. So it's very difficult.
And I know of young family farmers down in eastern North Carolina here. One of them came to Bluffton to the soil conference a couple of months ago. And I'm like, so they were very excited to meet you, Joe was, and to learn from you, because I know there are people who are encouraged by what you're doing, but it's going to take a lot more than just that, right?
Well, I'm glad we did what we did. I'm glad others are doing what they're doing, but it has not caught traction as well as I had hoped. And I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I know who controls it. The consumers control it. I mean, if you choose to go to the grocery store and buy a national, international product, it's fine, but it's not supportive of what we're trying to do here. And if you choose to find a farmer that is near you, that is farming in a manner that is pleasing to you, managing the land and the animals in a way, and community in a way that is pleasing to you, and you spend your food dollar with them, you're part of the solution. If you go to wherever you buy your food and buy an international brand, and most of the brands in there will be international and maybe a sub-brand if you follow the path, not many food companies, then you're contributing to the And if it's what you want to do, it's fine. You get to vote with your dollar.
Can we, and I was listening to another podcast of you, and I think you said you're probably one of the largest farms in the country doing what you're doing. Is that correct?
I might have said that. I don't know who keeps up with that, but we, in terms of how many employees we have, we're probably among the large, certainly among the larger ones. I don't know. It's just not a contest. And I'll tell you this. I'm bigger than I ever intended. This farm is bigger than I ever intended for it to be. It's not. I am a great advocate of local food. And I ship food to 48 states, but I don't want to. I wish I sold everything I produce in here. Now, it won't be sold in Bluffton, Georgia, but it's near here from Atlanta to Orlando. We don't need that many customers. And I want there to be a lot of White Oak Pastures out there, not called White Oak Pastures, but we are currently operating at a larger scale than I ever intended to operate on, and I'm willing to operate on a smaller scale. It suits me just fine.
Can we get back to feeding everybody with farms your size?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. Can we continue to feed farms can we continue to feed people doing the way we're doing it now?
Right.
No.
Right.
The earth, so let's talk about that a minute. The earth has a carrying capacity. And I don't know what it is. You don't either.
Right.
It has a carrying capacity. And when we get too many people on it, somebody's going to starve. Or we're going to produce excessive amounts of food in harmful ways, and they're going to die of something else. but the carrying capacity of this planet is going to control how we manage it long term. The short term, technology is controlling it. In the longer term, the nature will win.
Well, and we're seeing that right now with a variety of catastrophes around the world, environmental natural catastrophes. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so and I was listening to something else, and your biggest income generator is direct to consumer. Is that correct?
It is now. Yes.
It is now.
I started this company. I never intended to sell direct to consumer. I started the farm in Bluffton, Georgia, population at that time about 98 people, not wealthy people. And I didn't think I could make a living selling locally, even county-wise. Clay County, Georgia is one of the poorest counties in the United States of America, literally. So I never intended for this to be a local food business. It never occurred to me. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I immediately sought wholesale volume, and my timing was just so lucky, so lucky. I didn't do it on purpose, but I'm so fortunate that we entered the market as one of the first people producing grass-fed beef at scale, late 90s, early 2000s. We sold to Publix, who continues to be a great customer of ours, very reliant. Publix is so well run. They take you in and try you. If it works, they'll keep you. If it doesn't work, they'll thank you for your time and effort and won't buy anymore. It's just very professional. And we sold Whole Foods, who was my biggest and best customer for a long time. But I don't sell Whole Foods anymore. Post Amazon, things changed dramatically. And December 31st of last year, we ceased to do business with them. And that was economically painful for me. And we, fortunately, the online direct-to-consumer business has stepped up and saved us. So we're currently back probably a little over half direct-to-consumer online, and the other half is through grocery. And
okay.
I'm grateful I got both of them. And we have a store here in town and a restaurant and some other things like that. But mostly it's
so my listeners are they're in food service. And so how do you can't feed the people at the Georgia World Congress Center. That's some of those conventions are 17,000 people. That would be too hard. But how can food service get more involved in regenerative sourcing from farmers like yourself in regenerative agriculture?
I don't know. I mean, I got great friends in food service, people I think the chefs, I think the world of, they're dear friends of mine. Many people in food service are dear personal friends of mine that I've gotten to know through the years, done business with. But it's really hard for a family farm. As you pointed out, we're one of the larger ones in the country. But even our size, it's very hard to do much food service business. And the way food service seems to work to me, and I've never eaten at a place much nicer than a McDonald's or Dairy Queen while I was a grown man, so I don't know too much about all that. But they need to have something special that they market that everybody else doesn't sell. And they sell a hell of a lot of it for a short period of time, then they need something else. And that's not the way it works here. When we slaughter a cow, there's only so much skirt steak, there's only so much ribeye, only so much filet, and then we got to sell the rest of it too. And that just, it's very difficult for even my good friends in food service, that chefs and food service owners, to make all that work out. And I don't know that we'll ever really be good food service providers. I want to be. I enjoy I enjoy that exposure. I enjoy that company. I enjoy that everything about that. But it's just very difficult to make it work. One of the advantages of these mega meat companies is a food service provider or a grocery store executive, purchasing executive can pick up the phone and say, send me 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets every Monday for the next quarter, delivered to the following warehouse. And hang up the phone and it'll happen because they have plants that'll kill thousands of head per day and they can sort out what they want in the big meat market. On my farm, we kill 25 head of cattle a day. I'll never see a 48,000 pound load of 6-ounce fillets in my life. And so we got to sell it as it comes. And that fits the home cook.
Right. Yeah.
You can buy whatever you want to buy and cook it and make it work. And if I'm getting too much of it, I'll cut the price and put it on sale and somebody will buy it. But to be a player in food service is very hard, even though I want to.
Now, you were talking about the number of cows that you slaughter a day. And on my tour, I got to actually visit and see a cow get slaughtered that day and the practices that you go through. In Temple Grandin, I mentioned before the show, I get to hear her speak in a couple of weeks, but she helped design that whole system for you, right? And the practices that you do, because it's much different than what we see on movies that talk about the slaughterhouses, right? Can you explain that a little bit and the difference between what they do and what you do?
My slaughterhouse doesn't look anything like a big industrial slaughterhouse. Everything in my slaughterhouse is done by a man or woman with a knife. There are two electric saws in the whole plant. One that splits the carcass in half, splitting saw that splits the carcass, and then another saw that will cut bone in pork chops or T-bones or whatever. So it's all very, I think, artisan, done by people with knives. We don't have people getting repetitive motion injuries because they stand there and do that cut right there all day long. So that's the good news. And the bad news is it's horribly inefficient. It's horribly inefficient. Basically, a big industrial plant, their slaughter costs are zero because they harvest enough little bits and pieces to cover the cost. My slaughter cost is probably $500 or $600 or $700 a head because it's slow. There's no chains in my plant. There's a rail, and when I want it to move, or when one of my guys wants it to move from here to there, they push it. So I'm proud of it. I mean, I think it's just great. And I'll tell you something else. When the pandemic panic occurred, we never missed a moment. We never missed a day or an hour or a minute. We worked every day. Everything was fine. I worried about it. I worried about all my guys getting sick, but we didn't. And we never stopped slaughtering. Big slaughterhouses were closed for days or weeks. We never missed a minute.
That's awesome. And you slaughter on the farm. You don't send yours out somewhere else.
Correct. We have two slaughter plants built side by side. One red meat plant where we can slaughter cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, and a poultry plant where we can slaughter chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, ducks, or whatever else we got.
Well, and I went to a couple of weeks ago, speaking of chickens, I went to the Shanks family farm and helped them process chickens for the fall season. And we did about 250 chickens in 3 hours.
Pretty good.
So, yeah. So, and with just 5 of us, I think 6 of us.
But a big industrial plant will do 300,000 birds a day.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'd rather buy my chicken from the Shanks.
Me too.
So how can consumers be more help with climate change with eating direct from the farm or regenerative agriculture? How can we support that? And does one person's choices make a difference?
Well, I mean, absolutely. Well, individual choices make the difference. I wish that, it's almost embarrassing, but I'll tell you, we sold the book rights to White Oak Pastures about a year and a half ago. We were approached by Random House, Viking, something else, press, and they bought the book rights and we wrote the book. I say we, they hired a brilliant young woman, Amy Lee Graven, to write the book, and she spent a lot of time here on the farm, and she and I spent many hours on the phone, and the book is coming out in October, I think it's the 15th. It is called A Bold Return to Giving a Damn.
Wow.
I think a lot of the questions that you're asking will be answered in that book. It talks a lot about sourcing from someone close to you. I mean, I wish everybody that's listening would place an order with White Oak Pastures today. But really what I wish is everybody listening would find a local provider that suits that. Mm-hmm. And what's important to you, we shouldn't try to have this broad canvas of who is the best producer. That's not practical. I mean, what's important to you? I mean, for some people, it's all about the animal welfare. And that's great, that's fine. For some people, it's all about the environmental impact. For some people, it's all about the economic fairness to rural community and employees. Mm-hmm. For some people, it's some portion of all three of those, but at different ratios. So the best possible farm for you and the best possible farm for whoever that was that just came into your house may not be the same farm. I mean, it may be. So getting to know your farmer is very important. And I wish you could go and visit the farm and shake his hand or her hand but you don't have to do that. The good news is with social media, you can get a mighty good idea of how your farmer operates. And if mm-hmm. that farmer is as candid and open as we all can be, you got plenty of people verifying they're doing what they said they were doing. Mm-hmm. I bet there's 20, 25 people on this farm right this minute, eating in my restaurant, spending the night, taking a tour, just walking. We'd let people walk anywhere they want to walk. I mean, you can't just walk through the processing plant without some preparation, but you can go in there if you want to. So just know who you're doing business with and make a wise, thoughted choice on what's important to you.
That's absolutely phenomenal, and it's true. It's very true. And I can name Stephen and Joe and Harlow Custom Microgreens. I mean, I know my farmers that I buy from at the local farmers market. I have two more questions for you. There's been a lot of push for veganism and plant-based and not having meat. No meat consumption, that we shouldn't be slaughtering cows, etc. How can we do that with regenerative agriculture? I mean, is it a difference? Can we help that? Or, I mean, you're a rancher. You raise cattle and pigs and chickens and rabbits. How do you answer that question?
Yes, it's an easy answer. Well, it's easy for me to answer it. So first of all, let me address vegetarianism or vegan. I think that's fine. I think that anybody should be able to choose what they want to eat without satisfying anybody else. Everybody gets to choose. And if a person tells me they're vegetarian or vegan because they just don't like the taste of meat, I think it's fine. Because there's a lot of stuff I don't like the taste of. Or because the idea of eating something that was living is moving around is problematic to them, that's fine. Or there are many reasons people might choose to be a vegetarian or vegan, and it's fine. I'm not going to let you get by saying that I'm going to be a vegetarian or vegan because animals are destroying the earth. Animals raised properly are not destroying the earth, and in fact are essential to good land management. I don't believe you can name an ecosystem anywhere on this planet that doesn't have animals and plants and microorganisms living in symbiotic relationships with each other. I don't think there is one. It's the way it's supposed to be. It's the way nature's set up. And to say that you're going to be very supportive of the ecosystem, but you don't want animals to be a part of it, or just a token part of it, is impractical and lies, and just shows me that you really hadn't thought this thing through very well.
Because it can be done in positive favor, and it needs to be done in positive favor, right? I mean, because we live cyclically. Yeah.
I think that you got to start out with the understanding that if you're going to eat meat, something's going to have to die. That's the way that's always been. If you're going to eat a tomato, something's going to have to die. I mean, that's just birth, growth, death, decay. Birth, growth, death, decay. The cycles of nature. They're ancient. They'll outlive us. So I'm absolutely I have no negative feelings towards anyone who wants to be a vegetarian or vegan, but the reasoning needs to be right.
Right. Understand. All right. We do have one comment on here that I want to bring up here. It's back from Falobi. Sorry. Is it a must to administer drugs or injections to animals? Is it possible not to? And what are those you use, if any, and what's their importance on animals?
That's a great question. And I used to use subtherapeutic antibiotics on my animals all the time. I always kept antibiotics in the feed at low levels to keep them healthy. It's also a growth accelerator. It causes animals to gain more weight than they would without it. And I didn't think I could raise animals without it. And when I made the decision to cease confinement feeding, it was not because of antibiotic use. I just thought that was part of it. But when I opened the gates on the feedlot and turned the animals out onto the pasture, I didn't need the antibiotics anymore. The animals didn't get sick anymore. Now, if I had a sick or injured animals, I would use antibiotics on the animal. I hadn't had that in a very long time, but I would. That's the humanitarian part of what I do, is to eliminate as much suffering as I can among any individual in my herd. But so if animals are raised in a closed herd, so you're not constantly putting new animals in, new pathogens that they're not immune to, and they're out on pasture, we move animals every single day during the growing season to a new place. We're literally operating in the natural cycle as opposed to fighting the natural cycle. And antibiotics is just not an issue for me.
Wow.
And I think this should be an issue for the public. We only have so many antibiotics, and we use them to the point that so many pathogens are immune to them, and then we got a problem. And when I changed the way I farm, I didn't do it to protect antibiotics from resistance by pathogens. I didn't do it for that reason, but it was a very pleasant result, unintended consequence of it.
Okay, I just thought it, and I love that, because then we don't have to worry about it, right? Because there's not antibiotics in our food, there's not any, that's getting into our blood system, etc. All right, I lied, and I have two more questions actually. So I was listening to you talk about, and I was driving through North Carolina, and I love driving not on the highway, but through the rural highways to go from Charlotte to Eastern North Carolina, and I drive by all the farms. But I did see a couple of different places. There's the solar farms. I learned on a different episode that you are helping with some of those solar farms in Georgia with your goats. Is that right?
Sheep.
Okay.
We're doing a lot of solar grazing. In fact, I think it's about 2,000 acres, and it's going to be more than that. It's big. The way that happened is a friend of mine sold their family farm, been in the family for as long as ours has been, and they sadly chose to sell it, and it was bought by a large solar provider, typically called Silicon Ranch, from Nashville, Tennessee. And I had been watching solar installations go in and not been very happy with the ecological impact. This has only been about 2 or 3 years ago, so I was way down the road on this path by the time I saw that. So I worked really hard to get the CEO to come down here for a visit, but he came, a really sharp guy, Reagan Farr. And my goal was to convince him to let me graze the array and manage it the way I manage my holistic land management program. And shockingly, he bought into it. It's a long story, but he did. And I was very grateful for that. So we took over that first 680 acres, and we've added 2 other farms to it, and soon be 3 other farms to it. And I feel very good about the ecological impact we're making. I don't know about, I'm not a technical person, solar energy, the downsides of it. I don't know all that. I don't know that. I know land. I know a lot about land. And if we're going to use this land to produce power through those solar voltaic arrays, managing the land under them with livestock is the right thing to do. And we proved that. And I think it's going to be a thing.
And has the land changed, regentrified from that?
The land is changing. The land it was degraded farmland. It had been farmed industrially for generations. And we have got it stacked with warm season perennial grasses and grazing it with our sheep. And it's still, the land's only a couple of years into the journey. So it's not good, but it's better and better. It's noticeably better, and it will continue to get better. I know exactly what's going to happen down there. I know that. I've been on that path before.
Well, that's super exciting because I think it's being used to feed your sheep. It's being used to regentrify the soil to make it healthier and more organic, and then also producing power. So I think that's a win across the board. Okay, so my last question is, what do you wish people knew about what you do, and how does that translate into a safe, sustainable, and in food and beverage system?
I guess I wish people could just take a step back and look objectively at the way their food is being produced and make decisions on how they want to spend their food dollar based on the impact to the land and the water and the animals and the rural community, the rural economy, as opposed to just listening to the commercial and the break at Super Bowl and making a decision there.
Okay, I like that. And if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, I've got a banner here. Just let's put that banner up there. It is chat with you at whiteoakpastures.com, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Y'all come see us. We enjoy having company.
And I was going to say, Falabi needs advice from you. So that's the best way for he or she to get a hold of you, right?
That'll be fine, yeah.
Okay. They're a beginner and they want to follow in your footsteps, Will. So thank you. This has been Will Harris from White Oak Pastures, talking about regenerative agriculture and what we can do as consumers as well as in food service. Cross our fingers. Will, I appreciate you being here. And everyone, until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.